Welcome to episode 36.
Hey, this is John Lee Dumas of EO Fire, and you're listening to Who Did That Voice, where we take an in-depth look at voiceovers.
It's a new year, and if you're like me, you are already thinking about warmer weather and taking that getaway to that tropical or exotic destination. Maybe you plan to travel to Walt Disney World or Universal Studios. No matter what kind of trip you plan, 3D Travel Company is the company for you. Just visit 3dtravelcompany.com and let them know that Trenton sent you from Who Did That Voice. Or you can book on www.whodidthatvoice.co and click the Book Now button. For a limited time, Who Did That Voice listeners can receive a Disney gift card for qualifying Disney and Universal trips booked and traveled by the end of 2017. Book today and travel away.
Welcome to Who Did That Voice, the show where we take an in-depth look at voiceover. And now, here's your host, Trenton Larkin.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the show. Today's special guest is someone that you're probably rather familiar with, especially if you're an iPhone or Apple product user. Today's special guest is none other than the voice of Siri from iPhone.
My name is Siri.
Well, Siri, it is a pleasure to meet you. You know, the very first thing we always like to do when we have a special guest on the show is just to get to know them a little bit and know where they're from. Where are you from, Siri?
I was designed by Apple in California.
Well, Siri, thank you so much for that in-depth background into who you are, and I really appreciate it. You know, I really feel like you and I could bond and become really good friends.
I'll always be here for you, Trenton.
Oh, well, thanks, Siri. I really appreciate that. I think really highly of you, too. Well, are you ready to kick this off and do an interview with me?
Of course. That's what I'm here for.
Fantastic. Well, let's jump right into it then. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Who Did That Voice? Today on the show, we have Susan Bennett joining us. Susan, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Really quickly, we always like to start off with just kind of a brief background on who our special guest is, and how did Susan Bennett get into the voiceover industry?
I actually got into it by accident. I used to be a jingle singer back in the day when that stuff was done. And one day, the voice talent didn't show up to read the donut or the copy for the spot. And the studio owner said, Susan, you don't have an accent. Come over here and read this copy. And I did, and I was able to do it pretty easily. So that started everything.
So you talk about jingles. Are you a singer?
Oh, yes. That's how I started in this crazy business. Yeah, I've been a singer and musician. Well, I've been a musician, I guess, since I was 4. Not professionally, but I've been playing that long.
Well, what kind of instrument were you playing at such a young age?
Oh, a piano.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I used to play, but I don't unfortunately have that skill set anymore. But man, I tell you, I played violin too, and I loved both of those as a kid. So
yeah.
But I wish I kind of had kept it up, but I unfortunately did not.
Well, it's never too late. You can always pick it back up whenever you want. That's the nice thing about music. And you can always just enjoy music regardless of whether you play or just listen.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. Well, Susan, you have done a lot of different voiceover works, and we're going to talk about some of the different varieties of voiceover that you've done. But there's one in particular that is very well known to most Americans, at least half of us, and it's done for Apple. What is it that you voice for them, Susan?
Well, I am actually the original voice of Siri, and I didn't actually work for Apple per se. I was doing recordings for a text-to-speech company, and Apple sort of came in after the fact.
So Apple wasn't in the forefront of that originally, or they partnered with that company, or how did that work?
I don't really know.
Okay.
They really haven't said too much about it. I've been in touch with some other original voices of Siri, and we all had the same experience. We did some recordings in, early to mid 2000s. My specific recording was done in July of 2005. And then 6 years later, boom, there our voices were on millions and millions of Apple devices without our knowledge. So we don't really know how it all happened.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So it was kind of a surprise job for you then.
Oh, a big surprise. Yeah.
So So you worked for a text-to-speak company. What do they do? Could you dive into that a little bit for us,
Well,
Susan?
they do IVR, voice recognition software.
Okay.
And so they provide voices for GPS systems and all that kind of stuff. And the thing that made it sort of strange for all of us who became Siri is that most of those types of voices and phone messaging, that sort of stuff, is very anonymous work. It's not the type of voice that you really pay attention to because you're listening for information. You're not listening for the quality of the voice, or you're not really noticing the quality of the voice. You're just listening for the phone number or some other pertinent information that you need.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, when that anonymous voice becomes a persona, like Siri, takes on a character, takes on a personality, that is kind of a very different ball game completely. And it was a bit of an adjustment.
Did you have a lot of people start noticing your voice and go, "Hey, wait a minute, are you?"
Well, it's funny because some people noticed it right away, and other people didn't notice it at all, which is kind of strange, especially amongst the voiceover crowd, the other voice actors. Some people just said, "Oh, gee, I thought it was obvious," and other people said, "Really, that's you?" So yeah, it's kind of a strange phenomenon.
Yeah. Well, you talked about there being more than one original voice. Like, how many people actually were the voice of Siri?
I don't really know, but I
Okay.
do know that even though it was a process for concatenation, which, let me explain that, we read like hundreds, even thousands of sentences and phrases that were created to get all of the sound combinations in the language. Then after those recordings are done, technicians and computers go in and extract sounds, reform them into new phrases and sentences, and those are what end up on all of the digital devices.
Yeah.
So when we were doing those recordings, we had absolutely no idea what Siri was. But when they were making, Siri in different languages, it just made sense that even though they were concatenated voices, it made more sense for them to use the native speakers for whatever language they were using for the phone.
Okay.
And so, because certainly, I think I was the original English-speaking Siri voice worldwide, but, then there would be in other countries, they would have native speakers doing whatever, the Siri voice.
Okay. Now, you speak about being the original. Has there been another actress that's done the voice of Siri for Apple now?
Yes, they changed all of the original Siri voices, beginning with the OS 7 system, because we believe it's because we didn't have a non-disclosure agreement with Apple. They're very secretive about all their stuff, and I think they didn't really care for the fact that we were all promoting ourselves as the voice, since we weren't really paid for being on all of those devices. We were paid for the original recordings, but we didn't see any of the income from having our voice on all of those devices, and so as a result, we figured, well, if we don't get money, at least we can, it's a pretty cool thing to have been chosen, so we can go ahead and promote ourselves. But Apple didn't really like that, so they changed all the voices.
Wow, I did not actually realize that, because I know just recently.
No, most people don't. The new voices are fairly similar to the old voices. Of course, I can hear the difference immediately, but most people can't, because it's the new Siri is pretty much down on the same register, the same pitch as the original, and the same pacing. To me, she's not quite as edgy as the original. And maybe she was directed to be that way. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know recently they did an update on all the computers called Sierra, and it brought Siri to the computers now. So, it's a lot more widespread than it used to be on just the cell phone. So.
Well, I think that as technology, keeps improving and moving at the incredible rate that it does, I think you're going to see a lot of changes, tons and tons of changes. I mean, I could envision, Siri being replaced. I've heard of some character named Viv, perhaps, has been suggested. But anyway, there's certainly going to be a lot of different choices, and everyone can, choose if they want a British accent or, male or female. So yeah, that's change is just part of the environment.
Yeah, well, in the future, I'd like to call mine Jarvis and have an interactive holographic system with no computers.
Oh boy, yeah. Well,
Just like Iron
you
Man.
may get your wish.
Yeah. But wow, that's fascinating that you were able to be a part of that long legacy of Siri, because I know when they developed it originally, I don't think they really knew what it could be, but it definitely has expanded from when you originally did the recordings for sure.
Yeah, it's really become a phenomenon, and people have really developed a relationship with the app, which is a little weird, but
I know
I
you.
can't
No,
get
you
into
don't.
that.
That's funny. Yeah, you see some of these people, they do those funny videos on YouTube, and like they have like these like physical relationships, like the phone falls in love with them or something. And you're like, okay, that's a little crazy, but they're
Right.
like saying technology is going to become intelligent and everything and take over the world. But it's funny. But well, Susan, speaking of jingles, going back to that, I know you've done jingles for companies like Coca-Cola, Hardee's, Kroger, and so many more. And, you kind of briefly mentioned what it was, but could you tell us again, what is a jingle exactly, and how do you do a jingle?
Well, a jingle is just a song that's produced for a radio or TV commercial. That's the reference of what a jingle is. And back in the day, we used it. You could actually make a living as a jingle singer back in the 70s and 80s because that's what was done. Now, typically, some guy's doing it all on his computer with Pro Tools, or they're bringing back old pop songs and things like that for contemporary commercials. But advertising goes through different phases and different trends. But in the 70s and 80s, there were lots and lots of original jingles being produced for commercials. And several times a week, we would get together, groups of 4 to 6 people, and one or male or female person would do the lead vocal, and then the rest of us would sing backup vocals. And yeah, it was a career actually.
Well, that's very fascinating, and for those who are still maybe not quite sure what a jingle is, it's like ba-da-ba-ba-ba, kind of like that, right?
That's right. That's a good example. It's a very famous example. We knew exactly what product you were singing about.
Exactly.
Very identifiable.
Yeah, but just using that as an example of, hey, what is a jingle? Because sometimes people may listen to the show and just not know the terminology that we're speaking, and it may be Greek to them. So.
Yep, exactly.
But and as an actress, in voiceover, how did you break into the jingle industry, and I believe using your voice for the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra?
I don't know what that reference is. I sang with the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra with Burt Bacharach,
okay,
and a couple of other people, but I wasn't part of the symphony. But I have done a lot of singing, live singing, and I had my own band for many years. And when I first moved to Atlanta, I just went around to different studios and gave them, demos of my singing, and I just started singing jingles that way.
That's fascinating. Well, I've always liked jingles, and there are particular ones like the, McDonald's jingle that they have, and others that from when I was younger that were just very iconic and very, poppy and, catch, stick in your head kind of stuff. So jingles can definitely be very powerful depending on how they're done.
Right.
But with the voiceover industry, what are some other types of works that you've done besides being the voice of Siri and doing jingles, Susan?
Well, currently you can hear my voice at Delta Airlines gates worldwide, and that's about the only thing I can think of right at this moment. I've done a lot of commercial work, and so consequently those don't stay on the air for very long. They're always changing them. So I've done a lot of commercial work. I've done a lot of narrations and things like that. I did some stuff for the Discovery Channel, and just it's cool because every day is different. You just never know what's going to pop up, so it's kind of interesting.
Well, Susan, growing up, did you ever have a favorite cartoon that you latched onto, or a favorite cartoon show?
Well, I loved Popeye.
Excellent.
How could you not love Popeye and Olive Oil?
Yeah.
Who else? Yeah, I used to really love cartoons a lot when I was a little kid, but I can't seem to remember exactly which ones were my favorites, except for Popeye. That he used to be on the Popeye Club, in the early evening. So kids would watch Popeye while Mom was in the kitchen.
Well, I love Popeye, and one of my other favorites from that era is Little Lulu.
Oh yeah, little Lulu. Yeah, yeah. She.
So
No, I think I was going to say she predated Popeye, but I'm not sure if she did.
she might
I
have.
think she may have. I think Popeye may have lasted longer than she did.
Because I know some of the original Popeyes were black and white, and I don't
Yeah.
remember if Little Lulu ever was in black and white. I can't remember. It's been a while. But
Yeah, I think little. Yeah, it would be an interesting thing to look up, but they certainly there were a very long time ago.
yeah, but they're both classic and iconic characters. But Popeye has definitely always been one of my favorite. But as a kid, I still never liked my spinach, but I grew up to love it.
Yeah, me too.
Especially cooked. A homemade, like fresh. Taking the fresh spinach and cooking and everything. But that's kind of a sidetrack. But
Yeah.
But what kind of advice would you give to someone, Susan, who might be looking at voiceover and breaking into that industry for a career path?
Well, it's very easy to break into it right now because you can basically have your own recording studio with an iPhone, a mixer face, and a decent mic in a closet.
Yeah.
Which was not the case in previous years.
Yeah, yeah.
The problem with it is everybody's getting into voiceover, so the competition is really fierce. There are just so many people trying to do it, and there are a lot of celebrities that are getting the big jobs, big TV commercials and things like that, and big projects. The advice, if anyone cares enough and is really, really interested, just contact me through my website, which is susancbennett.com. 2 N's, 2 T's, and Bennett. And you can get my email address there and write to me, and I ask for the doc that I've put together. I put a lot of things you could do to break in.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing that with us, Susan. And is there a cost to that, or is it free? Or
Oh, yeah, it's free. The advice is free.
Okay. Well, that's awesome.
Investing in yourself is going to cost you.
Yeah.
Because I think it really does, you do need to find a voice coach, and there are certain tricks of the trade. It's not just good enough to have a good voice or to be able to read, although those two things are important. Good ways to begin. But there are certain tricks of the trade, and there are certain things that you have to learn to do to be good at what you do. And, you can put together a fantastic demo, but if you can't show up and do the work and do it in the amount of time, like Jingles and, TV and radio commercials are all either 30 or 60 seconds. And so you have to learn to be able to read within that amount of time. So there are some things that you have to learn and to practice to be good at what you're doing.
Absolutely, Susan. I appreciate you sharing that information with us. Do you have any other ways you can be reached, via social media or anything like that? Or
Yep, you can reach me on Twitter or Instagram at Seriously Susan, at SIRIOUSLY.
Okay.
Seriously. Yuck, right?
Yeah.
And
funny.
I also have a Facebook page, which is Susan Bennett VO Siri.
Okay. Susan
Or
Bennett.
no,
Via Siri.
no, excuse me, Susan Bennett, Voice of Siri. Yeah.
Okay. Susan Bennett, Voice of Siri. Okay.
Yep.
Well, Susan, I have one final question for you today.
Okay.
And the question is, what is the legacy that you want to leave behind?
Oh my. Wow. Well, I guess I would like to have some sort of, I hope I'm able to help people some way through the Siri story. I do a lot of presentations and appearances telling people about the story of Siri and the voiceover business and how it's changed, and I do a lot of different voices. So I'm always looking to do more of those presentations, and I hope that I can leave people with some perhaps advice and some suggestions and encouragement to go and do what they love to do.
Absolutely, Susan. Well, thank you so much for your valuable time. I really appreciate you coming on the show today.
Sure, I've enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.
Hey, you're most welcome. Well, Susan, thank you so very much for being on the show today. It has been an absolute honor and pleasure having you. Would you please just give us a closeout today as the voice of Siri?
Absolutely. Thank you, Trenton. This is Susan Bennett, the original voice of Siri. Nice talking to you today, Trenton. Bye.
Well, everyone, that's all the time we have for this episode. Join us this Friday for our next special guest Everett Oliver, who is a professional booth director. You won't want to miss this episode. Hey, do you ask yourself who did that voice? Well, if you do, go to our website, www.whodidthatvoice.co, and click on the Episodes tab. Choose an actor, pick their name, and see pictures from the different characters they've voiced in their career.
Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time for more discoveries on Who Did That Voice.